Hello and welcome to everyone. I am Sai and I have the great privilege of being with Sebastian today and Pierre. And we are here for the inaugural kickoff of the Anti-Fragility Institute. This is one event this week. We have another event next week and definitely more to come. Before we dive in and my dear colleagues introduce themselves and likewise get deeper into my background, our objective today is really to offer a little bit of exposure to the topic, explore it from a practical vantage point, explore different perspectives very much, and really engage you good folks that are here in a bit of a dialogue and a conversation through the chat. So a little bit of welcome, a little bit of wise, dive in from agility and explore anti-fragility, and very much looking forward to the conversation. Without too much more to say, I would love Sebastian, introduce yourself, my good friend.
Good morning, good evening, or hello to everyone. I don't know what time is it in your place. In Poland, it's 6 p.m. So or in Europe. Why me? Just few words about my background. Why I'm interested in the anti-fragility and anti-fragile. Generally, most of my professional life, I was working in the audit and in the risk. I was the chief audit executive and GRC officer in the airspace industry for around 12 years. And afterwards, I started my own consulting company that are focused on the information security, business continuity, cybersecurity, compliance risk, and so on. But what is really also interesting from my perspective, especially my private perspective, I'm the person who is looking for something new, some kind of challenges, and that's why from more than I think than 15 years, I was martial artist. I was martial art instructor. I run, I hike, I scuba dive. Since 2 years, I also started to looking for something new in the Wim Hof method or oxygen advantage method. So when I have some capabilities in my life, in my time, I try to explore something new, and I think it's also one of the pillars of the anti-fragility. Okay, thanks.
Excellent.
Peter?
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to speak. I have IT internal and external auditor. My experience is 25 years. I work for the biggest finance and law institution in Poland and Europe. Now I'm internal and IT auditor, expert in risk management, process analysis, corporate governance, and IT governance, especially compliance. I have certificate as approved compliance officer. I am advisor to listed companies on governance is compliance. My experience in implementation, consulting, and auditing of information security management system, IT service management, risk management, and quality management in various industries and organizations, including international companies. I co-author IT system to support GRC processes in the listed companies at Wolters Kluwer, Poland. And I am interested in psychology and technology aspect of anti-fragility, immune and hardening the biggest business processes. My hobby is psychology, and I play the piano.
Fantastic. And a little bit about my background. I'm a coach and consultant, very much a practitioner, if you will. The things that I focus on very openly transformation across organizations, across teams, with individuals at every level, across numerous landscapes, numerous industries. So I partner with individuals, teams, and organizations, really beginning to focus on calibrating, if you will, everything from business and strategy and leadership and culture and execution and technology. And I say beginning because that's just the beginning, and then ultimately impacts everything in between. And very much so process structure, as Peter mentioned, additionally human dynamics, as Peter mentioned, and very much in the same vein as Sebastian is talking about how, you know, I've come to anti-fragility and risk and resilience and all those other facets. So, you know, these fine gentlemen, if you will, very openly, you know, we connected and we launched the Institute and are very, very much looking forward to the possibility of what comes next for all of us in the community. So kind of with that background, gentlemen, I'm gonna just sort of open it up and say, let's talk about agility and let's talk about anti-fragility and how they interweave.
At the beginning, I would also like to ask all of participants to join us, to join our discussion, ask some questions, try to also share your point of view on agility, anti-fragility, resilience, and so on, because we've got, of course, our own experience on this topic, but it's also interesting because we are trying to build a community. That's why we share our experience and our view on fragility, anti-fragility, agility, but I think the most important for us it's also hear what you are going to say and to involve you in our conversation, our event.
Exactly.
We will be very happy to have you join today our institute. I hope that will be great opportunity and fantastic chance.
Definitely. So definitely the audience will engage, definitely put a comment out there as well. And let's kind of dive in a little bit from our vantage point, if you will. Sebastian, Peter, you know, what comes to your mind and sort of where do you kind of look at anti-fragility and agility just in the large, if you will, to start the conversation?
Okay, so I will start from agility because the anti-fragility as a term, it's a bit later, show a bit later. So from my perspective, agility is something adaptable to the new environment, or it's a continuous change management. So it's agility as a word, but anti-fragility, it's something more than agility, because it's also in one word, it's also agility and resilience. It's combined. It's a combination of those two characteristics. So anti-fragility, it's not only something resilience from let's say some kind of external event, disruption, and so on, but it's also the characteristic of adaptability to the new circumstances. So it's my point of view. I don't know, Sai or Peter, do you agree with me or view this different way?
Of course, I agree. Contrary to the cascade model, Agile assumes that at the beginning of the project, we are not able to accurately plan the entire course of the project. The Agile philosophy assumes that teams are self-organizing and cross-functional. In my opinion, in practice, this means that teams decide for themselves how best to they work, and their members have all the competencies and skills necessary to complete each iteration. Delegating such a large amount of responsibility to teams has a very positive effect of the motivation of employee who being responsible for the project being created, show and greater desire to work every day. Agility is not just about reacting. Agility is also the ability to generate the future in order to better respond to it. For me, for example, and I agree with Sebastian and Sai, agility is a manifestation of intelligence. It allows us to optimally adapt our reactions to the environment. Agility is whatever there is need to experiment and validate the hypothesis. Where there is uncertainty and complexity, market volatility, and changing customer expectation, will work in any industry that requires frequent or rapidly adaptation. Do we increase the spend of doing business? This meant we need to look at whether our existing patterns of operation are prepared for faster change than those we have been operating. This is my experience.
Well said on both of your parts. If I zoom out and kind of offer my perspective, which very much entangles and integrates with both of your perspectives, I think one thing we have to really start with and acknowledging is that agility as well as anti-fragility are not absolutes. So there are different degrees of agility and different degrees of anti-fragility, and respectfully, we can't be anti-fragile or agile, if you will, to any source and to any degree. So meaning an infinite degree. So we have to be aware that they are relative concepts to specific sources and specific ranges. I think that's one thing that's very key. So not absolutes. I think that the key points that you've both emphasized, and likewise I echo, is that agility is very much focused on change and our ability to respond or adapt to that change. And it's not react, exactly as Peter, you mentioned. It's more than reacting. It's responding and adapting to that change. So it does take a very active role relative to change. If we think about anti-fragility, if you will, pushing a little bit further, it's really evolving from disruption. It takes it beyond agility. You can be agile in the sense that you're adapting to change, but are you truly evolving from disruption? That's definitely a different caliber of interacting with the world around us. Additionally, I'll add one other thing. If we look at resilience is very much about recoverability. So are we able to recover? There is three different concepts, not absolute concepts by any stretch. And I really appreciate the way that, Taleb echoes this definition of agility in that at best, if you will, the fragile is unharmed by stress. And if you will, at the worst, the anti-fragile is unharmed. So if you think about those words and that he uses, it's very key that we keep in mind anti-fragility actually seeks a degree of disruption in order to grow. Really very much the subtitle of his book, Growth from Disorder. So, kind of with those sort of essential definitions, we're very, very interested in how the community has digested the concepts, and likewise, Sebastian and Peter, if there's more to add, based on how we've sort of chimed in, please don't hesitate to add more.
I think, Sai, we've got a question from Valdemar Rajic. What is the first step in building? Okay.
There you go.
Anti-fragility resilience of an organization. Do we have to start at the highest level possible, or bottom-up approach? Is it more pragmatic?
I have thoughts, but gentlemen, what are your thoughts first?
It's not so easy to say that something could be, or building anti-fragile organization, because the anti-fragility, in the anti-fragility it's a lot of components, and sometimes the organization itself, the way they provides business, is fragile. So it could be impossible to change it to anti-fragile organization. But we could, let's say, we could start of creating some internal systems and some patterns that could be more anti-fragile or more resilient than or more agile than the previous one. The first idea I have it's to expose our organization on the different level for some experiments, some stress, and so on. But the only way we could do this it's that we have to have some internal capabilities of doing so. So the people have enough time to experiment. Do not afraid of doing this. They do not afraid of failures and so on, because every aspect of the experiment, new idea, it could be failure, but what is most important is learning from what has happened and expose for a small amount of risk, not the great amount of risk.
I would like to try ask for the Waldemar question. For my experience, it depends. It depends on the context of the organization and internal environment and all of aspect, wide range corporate and IT governance. It depends on the management style and the human factors. There's no pattern, no perfect, no one absolutely right solutions. For my point of view, it's a long-term process with cooperation between management and simply workers.
Great insights on both of your parts, and thank you, Waldemar, for the question, or a set of questions, if you will. I think exactly as the gentlemen have echoed, I think the first step in really increasing an organization's anti-fragility and reducing its fragility, let's say, amongst other things, is very much really being aware of just the different context in which it operates, both from the external context as well as the internal context. And that could involve very much so being aware of what's happening at an individual level, at multiple functional levels, at group levels, at collective levels throughout the enterprise, and then most definitely at the enterprise level as well as the external marketplace. With that degree of awareness as a first step, and no one is saying go do an assessment, a year-long assessment by any stretch, but rather with the degree of awareness, we can begin to identify opportunities to go ahead and reduce the fragility of what we're fragile to, as well as increase the anti-fragility by helping the organization at different levels gain the courage to take risks that are appropriate, and that can strengthen the organization, the individuals, and the different groups. So it is multifaceted as to where you start, and it's very opportunistic at the same time. I think that's one aspect to consider, exactly as the gentlemen have also echoed. And then the to your second question, do you have to start at the highest level or bottom up? And one strategy that I have used, very, very keenly is to really approach it from all levels. It's simultaneously top down as well as bottom up, as well as we like to say, side to side, where you're looking at how to strengthen the organization's capability to be anti-fragile across the spectrum, across different units, across different groups, etc. So very much multifaceted, and definitely exactly as I think as Peter mentioned, very context dependent, and no one quick sort of answer to the question, but it's a great thought process in approaching it. One question I asked Sebastian, and likewise, if the group please or the audience please submit other comments or questions relative to what we're saying. But Sebastian and Peter, as you've encountered sort of the questions like Waldemar's asked, what are some of the greatest challenges that you've experienced in working with clients relative to achieving greater anti-fragility?
Oh, it's a lot. It's a lot. I think the most challenging part is to because we've got a lot of different projects, and because of that, sometimes we don't have enough, as I said, capabilities or space for anything else, or the margin of failure. I think it's sometimes if you are running consulting company and it's the end of the year because your clients would like to spend the money, and you've got few projects running simultaneously. It's I understand that it's completely fragile, because if anything happened in one of those projects, you don't have enough resources to support it. It's always high risk, and it's sometimes it's in most cases you success, and me and Peter success during those projects. But sometimes it's a complete failure. Maybe not complete, but it's a failure because the client would like to have everything on schedule, and that it's impossible to do this. And what, from my perspective, what is in those situations, what is really, really important, or during every project, is a really good communication. What's going on in the project? Do we have any problems? And if we have those problems, how we could together solve those problems? Because if we hide those problems and they rise up at the end of those projects, I don't think it's really possible to sit together and resolve it together, because the other side understands that you are lying, because that something wasn't okay during the project, and what will happen, and you not inform your client. So those, from my perspective as an entrepreneur, as a consultant, it's the highest risk in this kind of industry, because our knowledge, our experience, we know what we could provide, what a service we could provide for our clients, and we think, and that's we could provide the value, but the highest risk is of course the schedule of the project.
I would like to one moment return to distinguishes between agility and anti-fragility. In my opinion, these two approaches to management are not in competition with each other. They are complementary to each other, in my perspective. Agility run without anti-fragility will lead to uncontrollability and change would not want. We as auditors evaluate many organizations and see that change in often rapid and uncontrolled. Business continuity management, for example, is too expensive, and a lot of money is wasted on the improvement of immediate actions rather than overall processes. Mm-hmm. It's a bit like the immune system in a person. If he leaves a warm room in the cold wind and snow, he can catch a cold. But if he is to end up, nothing but will happen to him. He will be healthy. He's anti-fragile. For example, change in an IT project can generate new risks. With anti-fragility in mind, we can design them better.
Mm-hmm.
Then the risk of success of the project can be significantly lower. Anti-fragility is optimal condition. We must reduce fragility and increase fortitude in all areas of life, from corporate management to our own health. System can react differently to rapid change, shock, chaos. They are either resilient or fragile. Fragile should be kept in a safe environment, but our business environment is not safe. In my perspective, in Poland perspective, business environment is not very safe. Yeah. Anti-fragile are things that are hardened, that can be tempered. Business is hardened by such elements as crisis, stress, uncertainty. Anti-fragility is not a one-time idea. It's a business nature for me.
Yeah. Well said, Peter. And I think it is very key, exactly to your point. They are complementary and they are necessary. They need each other, quite honestly, because if you will, agility approaches it really from the order side, pushing change. If you will, anti-fragility approaches it from the disorder side, approaching disruption. And they do need each other in order to thrive, exactly as you're saying. Peter, before I offer a little bit more relative to the question around kind of what are some of the challenges, as Sebastian mentioned, what are some of the challenges that you encounter sort of relative to folks, an organization trying to achieve greater anti-fragility? Peter, any thoughts there, or?
Try to anticipate out of the box the consequences of your actions. Refer less to past experience and more to predicting the future. Let your imagination run to will and consider phenomena that your mind does not tell you at first glance. You are building an information system. Think about whether its use will have a social or climate impact. Generating Bitcoin in warming the planet is the only perspective, short-term profit important to you. Unfortunately, the modern world wants all variability out of as much as possible. We stabilize the business cycle. We stabilize income over a lifetime. We even stabilize our body temperature by taking antipyretics. But eliminating volatility actually weaknesses people, companies, and entire economies. Everyone painfully learns that the situation wasn't stable at all, just fragile. Well, almost everyone, all except those who are responsible for it.
Yeah, very, very well said. And you know, from my vantage point, integrating both of what you're saying is extremely key. If you will, there having no margin of failure or fragility actually creates more fragility. We need fragility in order to achieve anti-fragility at different levels, at different areas of the organizations, in different ways, if you will. As very much practice and Taleb emphasizes in anti-fragile, you have to have elements of a system or of an ecosystem that actually die and are fragile in order for the whole to be more anti-fragile. So very much in that same vein. And very much, Peter, as you mentioned, what I have found is the biggest sort of weakness is preconceived notions. People have a notion of normalcy as stability. or thinking that the world is not chaotic. And there are different, and please don't get me wrong, there are different elements that have different degrees of turbulence, but we assume stability, we assume predictability, we want control. And the reality is, uh, uh, reality is much more random than we aspire, if you will, and we perceive. And coming in with preconceived notions, for example, a lot of organizations will say, well, we experienced a crisis. How do we survive the crisis? Well, you got to dig in to it, because there's specific ways of achieving anti-fragility in your context that are unique to you. There are heuristics to leverage, but those preconceived notions are the ones that essentially play against us. So, definitely thank you both for sharing a little bit about your experience and helping us recognize, likewise, sort of what a lot of things are happening out there that add to fragility versus anti-fragility. There is another question that has come up. If we take a look at it, Tom is asking. He's asking, what are the objectives of the institute? Is it knowledge sharing, business development, commercial, if you will? And we, as the founders, have definitely had a lot of conversations, and perhaps both of you, Sebastian and Peter, can share your perspective, and likewise, I can echo my perspective as we are shaping this together.
Thanks, Sai. Let's say we are. It's the beginning of the institute, and that's why at the early start we thought about creating some community that could help us together create the ideas and long-term goals of the institute. Of course, we've got some ideas like sharing our experience, sharing our knowledge, gathering other people to also share their experience. Maybe in the future we would also would like to provide some kind of trainings and certification, but it's in I think in the longer future. Right now we are focusing on creating community and looking what will come on from our ideas. Is it the Anti-Fragile Institute? It's the good idea, bad idea? Is it gather people around us? So we'll see. We'll see. Right now, let's say we are exploring.
Yeah.
We are exploring.
We invite you to visit the Institute website and work with us. We want to take advantage of the sharing our vision and many different aspects of practice. We believe that many perspectives is very interesting, and I suppose that our mission will be in progress from sharing of knowledge, sharing experience. For example, very important for us is participating many people with creating the standards of or best practices anti-fragility. Not theoretical, but very practice between theory and practical experience.
Excellent. And I'll add kind of sort of my perspective. 2020 was quite the wake-up call for the world in so many ways, exactly as Peter's mentioned and Sebastian mentioned, relative to the fragility that is around us and the misplaced sort of faith that we have in our institutions and our society and ourselves, quite honestly, our arrogance, let alone. So from that, as the institute is coming together, I think some key things that we're very focused on is it is based in practice, and it really is practitioners forming a community, very much leveraging theory, but then real world practice. Additionally, it is about sharing and learning, and really developing our practice and the repertoire that we leverage. And it isn't about having the right or the wrong solution, but truly building that practice and helping organizations, individuals and collectives and teams, leverage what we're learning. So it's based in practice. It is a community of sharing and learning very, very keenly. And likewise, building out the practice so that we can all benefit from it. Some of the key things that I've noticed, and, just like Sebastian, just like Peter, we've been doing this for a long time. My book on anti-fragility actually came out in 2016. And that captured 20 plus years of work already relative to the concept out of practice. One thing that grabbed me, and I mentioned this, one thing that grabbed me in 2020 is, and I see it heavily now, people come up with an idea. They call it a theory, then they market it, then they train people, and then they go certify people. Well, and then they're not doing any of it. That's just ideas. That is not a community of practice. That is not a practitioner. That's noise, quite honestly. That's marketing. People can hire agencies to do that. That's not what we're interested in. What we're truly interested in, exactly as Peter just mentioned, as Sebastian mentioned, growing a community around theory and practice, truly having an impact and helping organizations have an impact. So if you go to our services page, actually, there's a community button. I believe that's out there that will allow you to join the community on LinkedIn, where we're going to continue to grow. And then the invitation that we're extending, if you will, is to help define the future of the practice. Forgive me, the Anti-Fragility Institute, together with the community. But it is rooted in practice. It's not simply, if you will, rooted in just ideas and marketing. So to your question, Tom, the objectives very much unfolding with the community. Is it knowledge sharing? Is it business development? Is it a commercial? All the above and more to come, but truly grounded in practice, not respectfully people coming up with ideas, throwing them against the wall and pretending that they work. So stories are a big aspect, to all of that. So hopefully that answers a little bit of the question, but much, much more to come together with the community, exactly as Sebastian and Pierre have mentioned.
Okay, maybe I will share one story.
Yeah.
I said before our event to decide, because we've met a few minutes earlier, and Sai asked me how I feel, and I said, today I don't feel very good. I feel rather terrible because yesterday I got the second vaccination, and I thought, because I practice, as I said to you, some kind of ice exercises, breathing exercises. I also try to run a lot and be fit. It also good healthy things. And I thought, okay, no problem. It's just another vaccine. It will be nothing. And from the yesterday night till today, I think evening, I felt really, really bad. I almost, as I said to Sai, that I hear my heart beating in my head like a drum. So I try to be anti-fragile, but and use some of those techniques. But I'm also fragile, as any of us. The only way, or the experience, or my thoughts about this experience is that it's very good, because I see that I'm not invincible, and I try to also look at the higher risk, not or the risk that I do not saw as clearly as now, because I thought I'm so healthy and in so good shape that most of this external events completely don't bother me.
Well said. So definitely, Sebastian, to your point, it's not absolute. You have greater anti-fragility to some source and a specific range of stress. if you will, but it's definitely not absolute. Excellent. Peter, do you want to share a story at all?
My perspective, very shortly, I read Taleb with great interest. We wanted to apply these things he writes and talks about. For us, as auditors, the better the organizations function and the more anti-fragile they are, the better and more stable the business is. Today, regulators and laws are weak and to do little to protect companies from risk. This is our hope that Anti-Fragility Institute will be great opportunities for the many companies.
I think we could also share some stories with Peter, because I think 2 years ago we've got a project in a very big Polish energy company, and they asked us, and also one of the Polish famous business psychologists to assess their business line and their failure in this business line. It was very interesting. First of all, because the management would like to also assess them why this failure happens, and because it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy because, as everybody knows, the company, it's a very complicated ecosystem, and it's not only what is inside company, what CISA said, that it's internal context, and there is also external context of the business market, and we have to take in our analysis, we have to also see both contexts, why this event happened, and we try to find out not one root cause, because in everyday life it's very hard to find one really root cause on the failure or event. Because as I said to you, I was working in the aerospace industry. That's why we used some tools and techniques for assessing the air crash incidents. So we use the same tools as in the safety incidents, and we try to rank, because the client asked us to rank the root causes. As I said, it wasn't impossible to say that only one. There was only one, and we ranked. I think more than 10. I think it was much more than 10 root causes of those failure. It was really a really big failure, because it was around 10% of the revenue of those organizations. So it was quite big, and they want to know not only the root causes, but how to prevent similar or other failures in the future. So we also try to give them some advice on every level. So on the psychological level, it was this famous guy, this famous business psychological guy that creates some guidelines for them, and me and Peter try to improve their internal processes and the systems to reduce the risk of the future failures. I think it was quite interesting. I couldn't say more because, as you understand, we've got no disclosure agreement, so I have to say as less as it possible.
Yeah.
Company won and we won. They didn't want to punish anyone, just wanted to understand why they lost and lost money. If they had been anti-fragile, then their story would have been very different.
Definitely. Definitely. Sebastian, did you want to share more, or Peter, or can I chime in with a few stories, if you will?
Please, sorry.
Good. All right. Excellent. So I'm going to offer a few stories, if you will, just and I'll shorten them very, very, very much so. The first one is working with an executive, well-established executive. So how do you achieve greater anti-fragility at an individual level? Very, very simple technique. I said to him, I said, look, help me understand what conversations you have that are important to you, what relationships that you have that are important to you, top 3, and then what key behaviors do you manifest that are important to you? And the individual listed all those out. And I said, okay, now we're going to go ahead and apply a little bit of stress. Very simply, I said, for those particular relationships, I want you to go a week without having those relationships, without touching those relationships, without contact, without conversations with those individuals. I said, we'll leave the behaviors, we'll leave everything else alone. And the individual said to me, said, you're serious? I said, yes. I said, this is a way to apply stress to now essentially figure out what other relationships you might need in order to manifest and to be able to advance in case those relationships collapse. So reducing a dependency is one aspect on those relationships, and then discovering new relationships through stress. As this began to happen, the person experienced it and quickly realized, wait a minute, this opens up a tremendous more other opportunities. This tremendously opens up more avenues for me to advance and for other things that I can do. So very simple technique of applying a little bit of stress relative to a relationship or a set of relationships at the individual level can begin to open up doors for achieving greater anti-fragility and growth. And you may say, well, gosh, Sai, how is anti-fragility achieved in that context? If there's more, if you will, disorder in the environment and disruption, that individual now can actually grow from it by discovering relationships as needed because they built that muscle and actually leveraging the relationships that they have. They're no longer dependent on the relationships that exist. So that's one key heuristic that if you will, experience has taught us. And Taleb talks about some of this in his book. I'm going to give one more example at a group level, if you will, or a team level, if that's all right. Here, I had a client that actually, this is at least, I want to say 2.5 decades ago at this point, called me and they said, Sai, we've got 2 groups operating. It's a financial institution, 2 groups, based on the cycle, the business cycle. In some portion of the year, this group is operating really, really heavily and is very, very hot in terms of running. And this group is cold. They're not doing too much. And then the cycle changes across the year. And then this group that was running hot now turns cold and they've got less to do, less work. And then you've got this other group that's running hot. And they said, the problem is we can't predict demand, right? The only thing we know is the cycle of the year, how hot they're going to run, how cold they're going to run. We have no idea. So my recommendation was quite simple. Throughout the year, start shuffling everything. Create, if you will, diversity inside the organization so you can grow from the stresses that demand causes on you. And they said, Sai, all the literature in the industry says you got to keep things stable. I said, well, that's the problem. Stability creates fragility. Go ahead and divert. And again, it's within a range. So you don't want to go crazy, if you will, respectfully, and just mix everybody up, but rather create longevity, but also create diversity. And as they began to do that, we said every month, let's go ahead and allow people to shift around. What began to happen is as people began to shift, they began to learn other people's jobs, began to learn how they can be more productive in their own traditional jobs, but also what they were learning from other roles that they were taking on. And what they began to see is an increase in productivity, an increase in impact relative to responding to the market, and also fundamentally growth from the stresses that the environment was causing. As there was more disruption in the environment, more variation in the environment, more VUCA, if you will, as the terminology would go, the more growth that those different groups began to see. And and I'll never forget, because they said to me, "Sai, all the literature says we got to keep things stable, keep teams together, because you want to optimize them." I said, "Yes, optimization is powerful, but to a degree, over optimization actually creates fragility, and that's a way to overcome it." So a couple examples, if you will, as well.
Good example, Sai. Maybe I will have another one
Please.
on from my personal life. It's after I started the oxygen advantage training, and during the everyday, and also during my running routine. So at the beginning it was really hard, because I have to breathe only by my nose, and especially during the exercises, it was really challenging for me. And the other challenge, because I started during the winter in Poland, it was quite cold, and it was the additional challenge for myself. And after I cut, it wasn't that I ran the same amount of distance. I cut it at half, because I said to me it will be too hard for my body to experience this new challenge. So I cut the distance at half, and after the winter, and I ran half of the distance during the winter. And only I learning breathing through my nose, only through my nose. I right now I'm not using. Of course, I'm talking with you. I'm using my mouth, but also try to do this in sleep. I tape my my mouth during the sleep, and I try to completely change my breathing behavior. And at the beginning of the year, so after there was no snow and so on, and I tried to run faster than it was the normal, and for me it was crazy, because my running performance increased more than 15%. It was crazy, because I ran less. I only changed the breathing behavior, and I run faster, and I feel much better after those runs. So my regeneration was also better. So it's. But of course, it's not last everything throughout. So I think during maybe one this year and so on, because my body is now feeling okay with those new experience. I will need to find out some new habit or new exposure to expose my body, and to also improve myself.
Yeah, that's a great story, Sebastian, and very much so. As you described, it's increasing the variation, reducing the amount of work, and actually getting greater improvements. So very powerful. Very powerful. I know we've got about 5 minutes left, if you will, and we're not getting any more questions. Maybe we do some sort of closing comments from both of you gentlemen, and likewise myself, and then we'll kind of set the stage for what comes next. Does that sound good, Sebastian and Peter?
Yeah.
Excellent. And any sort of closing thoughts from your perspective, Sebastian, and kind of what you'd like to really, leave the audience with today?
I think the one thing I would like to stay with you after today's event. It's to expose for a new experience. Just new experience. It's not have to be something extraordinary or something very risky. Just expose yourself in your daily life, in your work, look for some new event, look for some new book in completely different different topic than you are normally looking for. And throughout this kind of new experience, or let's say new stressors, I think it's quite interesting, because you will see that afterwards you will grow. And it's quite from myself, from my own experience, it's fascinating, because every time I looking for something new, maybe not every time, because sometimes it could be a failure. So sometimes I'm looking for something new, and it opened my eyes completely. And the reward after taking so low risk is so big that the idea of looking for addition, something new, some new experience, it's much bigger than it was before those experience.
Well said, Sebastian. How about Peter, yourself, my friend? Anything to leave the audience with on this first conversation?
In my perspective, the solution then is not a multiplication and complication of regulations and the stricter enforcement by state agencies. Business or government agencies will perform better when decision maker bears the personal negative consequence of the decision or omissions. I was born in a small town where 3 railroads crossed. When was being built a viaduct, the whole team of builders stood under it as the test train came in, and he was reading on top on them. The heaviest train, no one of them stole construction materials. Even one of them didn't do it. For me, very important is a personal responsibility managers for the success, but for failures too. Yeah. We live in the world that we do not understand, full of recognized feedbacks and hidden dependencies, which we try to master intellectually by adding after the fact explanation for occurrences that took place earlier. There is saying in Poland, the success has the many fathers, failure is an orphan. Companies harden themselves and cost of the fragility of others.
Yeah.
In my opinion, to better understand the world, we should be improved our anti-fragility. Then we will be better able to tolerate quick and rapidly change and agility. Improve our fragility. To be able to tolerate quick, rapidly changes.
Well said on both of your parts. And if I leave sort of with some last comments before we close out, I think one of the key things that we're all really emphasizing is there is a tremendous world and reality that we're in awe of, and we can all grow from that. And exactly as you're both emphasizing, look at the stressors that you encounter, look at the experiences. When you think about growth, exactly as Sebastian pointed out and Peter emphasized, it's not simply the successes, but the failures, if you will, if we define them as failures, are opportunities for growth. Those are true opportunities for growth. And that is something that I think the business world at large is becoming more accustomed to learning that lesson, especially given the time of 2020. Anti-fragility has a great history in terms of the roots. And by all means, now it's, now we're confronted with confronting our own reality and ourselves. Before we close out, definitely you've got our contact information that's listed here with the Anti-Fragility Institute, visiting the websites, a lot more to come, most definitely. I know there's been a lot of conversations and interest in a degree about the certificate, if you will, and getting some sort of certification or recognition for this event and the next one that's coming up. What we're calling this is really is an exposure certificate. So it's based on the conversation, etc. What we'd like people to do, if you are interested in an exposure certificate, please email us, and you've got the email address, of course, that's identified here. And what we ask is email us within the next 38 hours. So definitely, if you'd like that acknowledgement, next 38 hours. And in your email, really go ahead and share with us kind of some of the major takeaways that you got from this conversation and any other thoughts that you'd like to share with us. Please don't just send an email and say, I want an exposure certificate. We are very interested in a conversation and getting your feedback. So with that, thank you so much, Sebastian. Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you so much to the community. And we'll look forward to much, much more to come together.
Thank you for today conversation, Sai and Peter. Thank you all for participation, and we are looking for your comments, and maybe we'll meet in the next event or in our community.
Thank you for us.
Thank you so much.